Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. It's lovely to see so many names down the side of my screen. It's great that you're joining the Geographical Association Welsh Special Interest Group. This is our second webinar, and you can see it's focusing on fieldwork experiences. And our focus on experience was taken from something which Michelle Gosney said when we had our last webinar in November. Obviously, you know that she's from Estin, and she spoke very cogently about the need for experiences. So we hope this afternoon will be useful for primary and secondary colleagues, and for those new to geography teaching and those who've got much more experience. And you can see on the screen there are some names from which you'll be familiar with many of those names. Steph Robinson is going to talk first of all, and Fiona Rennie from Isgor Friars, and then Rob Pengelly is sandwiched between the two, but I'm going to pretend to be Rob Pengelly. My name is Jill Miller. Rob has been frog marched to a fire safety event to look at fire extinguish and so on. It's a 3-line whip, so I'm giving his presentation, and Nicola's helped with that. She's going to draw this afternoon to a close with questions and so on. So please do use questions in the chat, because there's lots of things to share. I'm going to leave my screen. Steph, over to you. Thank you so much. Pencoitra High School, here we come.
Thank you, Jill. Okay, please let me know if you can't see what I'm about to present.
Got it?
Okay.
That's lovely.
Are we okay with this, Jill? Everybody good?
Yes, yes, yep.
Okay, well, just echoing what Jill said, welcome to everyone, colleagues as well. And I will put my details up at the end just for a few minutes. So if you do have any questions or queries, or you want to get in touch about further ideas from the session, then please, by all means, do so. So as Jill said, I'm Steph Robinson. I'm head of geography at Pencoitra High School in Barry, formerly Bryn Hafren Girls. So I've been head of geography across 2 different schools now for 10 years. And I'm also a published author for Hodder. So I'm sure lots of us have got their textbooks in our cupboards in geography. And I'm going to make an absolutely shameless plug for a book that I've got coming out, which has been sort of a year in the making, if you like. But there's lots and lots of really good ideas, which I use practically every single day. And hopefully they'll be of use to you today as well. So there's a really, really interesting quote here. And again, this does, I'm falling quite heavily on the book because there's a lot of good practice in there, to be honest. So fieldwork makes geography come to life, puts everything into context. What a wonderful, wonderful quote. I also read another one about fieldwork helps students to understand the reality of the messiness of geography in real life. So how can we use fieldwork? Why should we, first of all, let's link with Curriculum for Wales, because obviously that's the next big sort of milestone coming up in 2022. So why should we encourage the use of our own cynefin or local place within our own doorstep? Have a quick read of that. I'm desperately trying not to commit the cardinal sin of reading directly off the PowerPoint. But there's lots of reasons, and I found myself in the last 2 years, because of GCSE coursework for NEA, really forced into using my own locality more and more. Not just to mention because of rising costs and things like that, but also because of COVID conditions, and obviously lots of school trips have been postponed or cancelled, yet the NEAs have still gone ahead. So I've had to really be quite creative with the titles that we've had from the exam board from a GCSE and A-level point of view. But again, I come back to that quote at the beginning, colleagues, it does encourage children and practitioners ourselves to use fieldwork to understand the messy reality of geography issues. So I asked a few colleagues, primary and secondary friends of mine, what really holds you back when you're conducting fieldwork? What are some of your fears? And these were the top 4 that came out of really about 6 or 7 that came to me, and some of them were overlapping with the feedback that I had. COVID is obviously still there. It's still an ongoing issue. But also things about equipment and costs. And that is a massive sort of budgetary issue for many, many departments and many primary schools as well as secondary. Some teachers were quite fearful that if they hadn't trained in the subject, and maybe they were a non-specialist delivering it, or maybe they were a primary school teacher and it wasn't their main specialism, how were they going to get around the practical side of it if they've got very little, if any, experience of delivering field work? So these are some of the really quite real and quite well-founded fears that my colleagues said when they were asked to deliver field work. So again, this book is coming out in May 2022. So we're just doing the final proofs at the moment. So I do apologize for some of the watermarks. But again, it's stuff that I've used every single day of my head of department career and my career as a teacher of geography for the last 19 years. And I've really honed my own locality, which is really what I'm going to talk about today. So what skills do we really need to consider? And this is a key part before we even set the children loose when they're actually out conducting their field work. So these are lots and lots of skills that were founded within the HUB AOLE documentation for humanities and especially under geography. So there's lots of cross-curricular skills and responsibilities here, and obviously some that are very subject specific to geography. So we keep the integrity and the fabric of that subject alive. A big one, of course, is linking in with obviously healthy and confident, creative, enterprising, and you can see the 4 purposes coming through here. And that is something that when I'm planning, particularly for Key Stage 3, I'm obviously making sure I've signposted that really clearly in my planning document. So these are all really, really quite critical skills for all geographers and curriculum for Wales Key Stage 3 pupils. And again, just going into a little bit more depth, and you can start off really easy with the example I just showed you, those types of skills. But generally, this is regarded by most geography teachers, I would say, as the key facets of planning good fieldwork in geography. And again, how much detail you choose to go into this, especially within your own school environment, your own neighbourhood, your own high street, is totally up to you. But trying to make sure that we at least pay homage and signpost each and every one of these will actually stand you in really good stead when it comes to delivering a really, really fast-tracked, fast-paced experience for those students who will hopefully then enjoy fieldwork even more. What I tend to do with my Key Stage 3 students, and I'll show you a little planning document in a second, I make sure that they understand and they can deconstruct and tease out the geography in all of these things. So obviously A-level students are very well versed, as they have been at GCSE, in saying, well, what makes a good risk assessment? What sub-questions can we ask each other? What data presentation tools are we used to using across maths, across science, in geography? This is probably, I would say, a really good starting point, which I have used time and time again with Year 7, for example, where we've done a microclimate study, which I'll show you in a second. And I've really helped them to tease out the geography by putting this up and deconstructing what they understand by each of these terms. And then saying, right, okay, guys, if we're looking at maybe a question we can ask ourselves about our school environment, what type of question could we come up with? So this is an example of a very, very basic planning document, which I've used with Key Stage 3 when they've done a microclimate study within the school. And again, things like sub-questions, I always fall back on the who, what, where, when, the 5 Ws and so on. And I keep this as simple or as elongated as I think is the ability of the class. You might just want to have maybe 1 or 2 sub-questions. You might even want to give them some model answers and one that may be, again, teaching grannies to suck eggs, but one that maybe you filled in and one you made earlier. So this is a very, very basic planning document, which I tend to use with Year 7. And again, I think geographers, we're all really, really good at this. I think this is a real geography strength of getting pupils to ask and answer these types of questions. And again, it comes back to the 5 Ws and the how, asking really important geography questions. We keep hearing the phrase, to talk like a geographer. These questions really do sort of signpost how to talk like a good geographer. So I've got these up around my classroom. We've got a thinking wall, and we often get the students to go up and refer to them. And maybe they've got whiteboard pens and they actually write underneath what they think some of the answers are to some of these questions. Again, all of this I am stealing from my own textbook, but it's a really, really good way of getting them to think constructively and critically. Something else I like to do, and I do this within my classroom teaching as well. So this is an image of the wetland ecosystem in Cardiff. And this is where I've actually taken my GCSE crew and we've gone down there. But before we've gone down there, to help generate sub-questions, we've put a photograph of where we're going in there. That's our locality. And I've got them to come up with some 5W questions, a how question, and we've used this question matrix. You can put an image of your own school, your own high street, anything you want in there. And again, if anybody does want an example of this question matrix grid, my email address will be at the end if you want to get in touch. So this is really good for generating some thinking questions, and then they can use these to fall back on when they're trying to write up their little conclusions at the end. So using your own school grounds, again, why did I start using my own school grounds quite a lot? I was a little bit hamstrung because of COVID, of course, couldn't take the children very far. It's cheaper. It does avoid things like fieldwork deprivation. So we're in a very socially deprived part of Barry, something like 48% free school meals we're at the moment. So trying to obviously budget for buses and taking them further away for trips, that's also something that's factored into me using my own school grounds a lot more. And also we've got some wonderful resources, staffing wise, locality wise, fabric wise within our own school environment. So I think it's always a really good place to start using your own school grounds, not to mention from a safety and a time saving aspect from traveling. Now, again, I'm just sort of signposting snapshots and screenshots of things that really do come out of the Curriculum for Wales book, which we're having published in the next couple of months. But it does take you step by step through what makes a good plan, what you have to, consider, group work, locality, risk assessment, data collection tools. And there's lots of really step-by-step tips and tricks of the trade that will help anyone delivering geography. So again, we look at all the different fieldwork steps from that sort of hexagonal diagram I showed you at the very beginning. And there's some really, really good ideas in there that colleagues have also suggested as to how we can present and move forward with our fieldwork. And again, I've just finished off with the final couple of steps on the fieldwork experience. And this doesn't have to be a GCSE or A-level style piece of work. You can make this as simple as you want. The main thing is we're trying to develop the children's geographical skills, even if it's developing them from primary, and we know Estin talked about progression and wanting to see progression. This would be a lovely way of developing those fieldwork and that experiential learning through fieldwork. So this is an example of some of the different ways that you can collect data around your own school grounds. This is Pencoitra High, which is about to be demolished. This is the old map here on the right. There's a little example of a risk assessment, and the children will be pretty good, I found with Year 7, at coming up with the different risks around the school. And on the left is an example of a very simplistic environmental quality survey, or sometimes people call them bipolar surveys. So again, there's lots and lots of really simplistic examples in the book that's coming out, and these are ones that literally, I mean, the artists have done a wonderful job, to be fair to them. They didn't look as good as this on my computer, but a very, very clear example of data collection tools for using your own locality. And again, we've got some different data presentation techniques. We've got some success criteria, which they will be marked on further down the line. So we're looking at progression, GCSE style speak, even maths refer to things like SALT and SAC. And on the top right, we've got some different ways the children can try and develop their data. And I'm just showing you literally some whistle-stop tour screenshots of what's in the book. There's lots of examples of things on the top right that you can see as well. So again, we're just taking them through that progression, those different steps of the fieldwork experience. Now, if you want to go slightly beyond your own locality in terms of your own school environment, you might want to investigate the local street or the local cul-de-sac that backs onto your school. So how can you investigate maybe cities and towns in your own local area? It does really, I think, bring to life, colleagues, a really, really good sense of what our local place means to our children. So this is an example if you want to investigate your own high street. So still within your own 5 mile, within your own sort of doorstep. And again, we see the progression on the right as the children become more experienced as they move through the school and through the key stages. An example of an environmental quality survey. And I tend to get the children to build on their experience from that really simplistic one I just showed you to come up with and populate some of the statements you can see on the right. So it is all about developing all of those different skills and talking like a geographer. And you can see some examples there from the book of data presentation techniques, question, 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 and getting them to talk like geographers, getting them to think critically like geographers. And again, these are questions which I have up around my notice board in class. And again, I refer back to different steps, fieldwork steps you can see on the left. You can see I've made links as well with this piece of fieldwork to the 4 purposes and how are we ethical consumers within our own high street. Even you can ask children to bring in ethical or fair trade goods or something from home and they can discuss whether they are ethical consumers within their own locality, within their own home. So it really is about using what we've got around us. And the main thing is question, 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 get the children to think like geographers. And here you can just see some very, very simplistic examples of how children can present those questionnaires. So you can see the questionnaire just underneath. And I think this sort of generation of questionnaires is very much within children's ability if we can scaffold it correctly for them. And again, if you want to progress and make that questionnaire slightly more difficult, talking about open and closed questions, there's lots of examples there. On the right, you can see again a little development of that planning template, inquiry questions, sub-questions, who, what, where, when, and why. And again, get them to talk like geographers. So what are the takeaways from this field work? Get the pupils to ask lots and lots of questions about their own environment. Use lots of stimulus materials. Get them to walk around the school grounds as long as it's safe. Get them to go through those different fieldwork steps and teach those fieldwork skills and those cross-curricular skills explicitly. Signpost them in your planning documents. Link to Cynefin, locality, the 4 purposes, wherever possible. And please don't suffer in silence. If there's anything you think I'm not quite sure how to deliver that, there's lots and lots of support with everyone on this call, with ourselves at the GA, and obviously I'm going to leave my details here for you. So thank you ever so much, and I hope you will find this book incredibly useful. It's been an absolute pleasure to write it and to present today on behalf of the GA. Jill, thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Steph.
So I'm just going to leave that up for a second, Jill, if people want to jot my email address down, that's absolutely fine.
That's fine. You can always come back to it at the end, actually, if you need,
no
problem.
Need to. Okay, thank you, Jill. I'm just going to stop sharing.
That's fine. I'll pop it in the chat.
Thanks, Jill.
This was option. Do you want to continue? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Steph. That's great. Now I'm just going to carry on from that and share as practical things from Rob Pengelly in Welshpool, some of which will refer back to what Steph has been saying. So thinking about key questions for all our field work, whatever we're doing, a practical example, but focusing particularly on some secondary data sources and some other sorts of resources which you may use or you perhaps haven't thought of, but if you have any more, please do put them in the chat. But fundamentally a reminder of what's in curriculum for Wales. Whatever we do in teaching geographically, we've got to think about those geographical concepts. So they're going to underpin all that we are doing, and many of them are going to be explored through fieldwork. And just as Steph was talking about key questions, I've added them in here again, but also in a more sophisticated way on the right-hand side. So asking about patterns, trying to get students to explain different relationships, thinking about what would be appropriate for different types of evidence, and thinking about different perspectives. So those key questions that fit all our geographical thinking, and never very far away. So this is what Rob it does with his year 7. He has a map of Montgomery, and he takes that, just an OS map, and he takes that square, and you can see from his worksheet, he looks inside the box and he gets students to look at symbols, and he gets to look at other features using the rest of the map. And the key question about the key reason for this is he's asking the question, where is it and what is it like? And then he goes on from there to think about how many shops there are and what sorts of shops and what other sorts of services. You know, what is Montgomery like? They call it Monty when they're in Welshpool. You know, where is it? What is it like? Are there changes in services? Are there shops and services which you would expected to find in this town? So it's a very, very simple worksheet which you can download from this, or you can ask Rob for it. And then it's the question of going out and actually collecting some data in terms of evidence of people and vehicles. Where is it? What's it like? Is it like this all the time? And he gets the students to think about what sort of graph would be appropriate, thinking about the numbers of shops and services in Monty, and demonstrating the appropriate type of graph. And then, and this is perhaps not what some of you may use this, but not everyone. He goes to a site called Geograph. Now, this is Geograph. It's an amazing site. It has photographs of every grid square in the country, Wales and England, and I think Scotland actually. And basically, he goes to Geograph and he picks out photographs, which will then generate questions. So you can see down the right-hand side, you put in Montgomery into the search, and it comes different aspects of Montgomery that he wants to focus on. That's the kind of search page. You put in your place, so you put in your region, and you can think about photographs which are historic. You can think about landscape, and they're all free to access. So he's picked things like this. Montgomery Castle, and there's the High Street there, and he's asking students to look at them. What can you see? Is it like this all the time? How is it different from today when he takes his students out in 2022? And there's an exercise there, just a reminder perhaps for the people who are new to teaching geography. Big difference between a label and an annotation. If students label it, they're just saying what there is. But if they're annotating it, they're making a comment or a geographical explanation for what they see. What he's doing, he's getting students to think about what factors are good, make a good site for Montgomery. And you can see on the bottom right-hand corner of this screen, he's got a diamond ranking. Now that's the final version of the diamond ranking, but what they're starting off with, they're just making a list on pieces of paper, and then they're getting together in their group and they're working out what is the most important at the very top, most important factor for a settlement, and what's the least important at the very bottom. And my experience is that the middle three are really difficult, but actually it's the top and bottom are the ones which perhaps the students should focus on most of all. But it's a good exercise, it's a good discussion. And then he goes on to think, not just from Montgomery, but going on to other places, local places like Welshpool, and they've got some population data. And the question here, is it like this everywhere? How might it be different? So you've had a small village, and you think, okay, what would it be like if it's in a larger town? And he's asked students to think about data and how you would graph. In this case, he got some population data. He got his data from school, but local authorities have data, and so do Stats Wales. Now, I just put into Google population data for Welshpool, and I got this, absolutely loads. So and it comes from Stats Wales. This happens to be the population page. You can go into as much detail or as little detail as you like, but there's lots of different aspects that you could play with. So he started off with some basic observation of their local area, and then he's using secondary data to expand and get students to think in a slightly broader way about it. Another resource he uses is Digimap. Now, Digimap is available for everybody across Wales. It comes from the Ordnance Survey. It's a superb resource. Nicola can talk about it later if you want some more information. It will give you maps from now way back to the 1880s. And you can put layers. You can see on the left-hand side there are different icons you can click on there, and you can add things, you can take things away. It's a superb resource. It gives you photographs as well, and I heartily recommend it. And you can see on Digimap, they've also got some particular things. If you go into resources, they've got things like, you know, particularly for primary, lots of different ideas for primary. And then some secondary resources. Is there biodiversity in our school, and the square of the year and so on. So if you're short of ideas, go to Digimap, look at some of the resources which are there, the ideas, and it will help you to get started in your local area. The other thing which Rob uses is a goad map. Now they're very expensive, these goad maps, but planning departments have them, and you only need a little section. And you know, you buy them once and they last a lifetime, and they give so much information about a particular place. So you can use them with your pupils just out of curiosity. And there's some details about Welsh Pool, and every building is identified with its particular use, whether it's a newsagent or a hotel or a bed and breakfast, and obviously they're by date. So if you have the goad map from 1960 or 1990 or 2000, you can compare, change. You can use this as a base for a land use map and color in different types of land uses. It's a great resource, but they are expensive. But once you've got one, you can make really good use of it. So they're the two or three big map resources that Rob was really recommending: Geograph, Digimap, and the use of goad maps. But thinking about other things, and a lovely phrase that came from Nicola, she said, I'm a squirrel. I just squirrel things away. I find all sorts of things. And she has a basket in her classroom, and you just hoard leaflets, bits of data that other students have collected from previous years, artifacts, there, newspaper articles, old photographs. Could be a homework exercise where the students go and raid their parents or grandparents, old collections. Think about tourism. It can be a great homework search. But Steph mentioned questionnaires, and she had that worksheet there on fair trade and ethical. And a really good source of a good activity for pupils is to ask people what they think. But as Rob said, you know, his head wouldn't let them within his pupils within a mile of asking people in the street. But families and friends can be a great resource. Interviews. Older people love talking about what it was like in the old days, and it's a superb source to have as a record once the students have showed it with you. You get them to use their digital expertise and put them onto MP4 and so on. I mean, I think that many families in Wales don't move too far, so there's often a wealth of history about places and cultural experiences, and these memories are really important, and it's a great link with local history, of course. And the other thing he suggested, of course, is using local school staff, because all teachers have opinions, and they travel from different places, different distances, and they have perspectives on local issues. So it doesn't have to be just going out and measuring and looking, although that's often the basis for what your fieldwork is going to be, starting with the local school. But you can use other data to good effect. And then you can use people who are in the school also. So that, I'm sure Rob would have said a little bit more about those, but basically that's what he was recommending. for the use of secondary data. So thank you very much, Rob, and I hope he's enjoying identifying different types of fire extinguisher. So I'm going to stop sharing and ask Fiona if she'll take over.
Hopefully I'll be able to share my screen seamlessly.
Fantastic.
Or perhaps.
Thank you, Fiona. That's come up beautifully.
Good. Right. Thank you. Thanks, Jill. Thank you, everybody. Once the remit I sort of was set was to look and see what we could do specifically on the school grounds. So there's obviously a little bit of perhaps crossover between what we've all been saying. But I was looking at the what matters statements, inquiry, exploration, investigation. I mean, this is obviously where geography comes into its own to some extent. And the fieldwork experience, or the experience element, is definitely where geography can contribute to in terms of the humanities. So what I've really got here is I've almost squirreled or curated a variety of different bits of information together, and I'm sure that none of this is new to you, but just perhaps act as a reminder, so that geography contributing to the experience aspect. One of the things that we worry about, I think, whether we're geographers or at Key Stage 3, it could be that you're not a specialist in that particular subject that you're delivering, so there could be hesitancy, and our primary colleagues, as we've already mentioned this evening, may not be geography their lead subject. But how do we fit them into those short lesson experiences? How can we experience something not always within the classroom? And I think this is really important, how to connect the theory into the real world. We've already had a quote that I do like, which is that, geography is messy. It deals with real stuff. And I think that as our unique selling point, if you like, is the fact that we look at the theory, but then we try to apply the theory. And basically, how do we experience that concept without going off site and the hesitancy that we have had? These do reflect what Steph said earlier. If the investigations in the local area are relevant to all pupils who are participating, that the school grounds offer that first-hand experience. In fact, they may well have knowledge of the school site that you don't, with having to hide from the worst of the wind and rain when they're not allowed in the school buildings. It's generally a safe location. That's one of the things, isn't it? We do worry, the thing about doing questionnaires, I've always been reluctant at getting my pupils to do questionnaires and sort of interact with people. So, we do have those worries. And it's also, it's the opportunity for the pupils to learn. They can have that experience there. If we're a little bit worried, we're in charge of setting those learning objectives, and we can deliver it, and we can look at our individual class. So if you're thinking about organising it for a year group, the class teachers who are delivering it to their individual classes can actually change it without any major issues or worries. There's no transport, and to some extent it's free. There is a link here because this was a document that I found about written a series of schools that included some primary schools on how to collaborate on school grounds based fieldwork. There's many others there. Obviously, the GA has got a wealth of information there and ideas that you can pick up or just sort of polish off an idea that you've got. There's also the school grounds fieldwork on the RGS as well. So almost there's plenty out there to get you thinking and to start, sort of experimenting perhaps. So I thought I'd just share then a few ideas of what I've done And I'm sure that many of you have done similar kind of things. But we were looking at this in terms of the new curriculum. And one of the issues is that we find that as a secondary school teacher, that we try and give experiences at Key Stage 3. But perhaps because they're going out, they're having to spend money, not all pupils can actually take part. Steph did say about the situation in her own school with a high number of sort of FSM pupils and an element of deprivation there. So we have to really consider that. And one of the issues was by the time they get to GCSE, they may never really have done an experience or a fieldwork experience. And then all of a sudden, on top of all the content, they've got to understand how to inquire. So we looked at our school map, not a brilliant drawing, I have to say. I think I need to get onto those gold maps that I've just been seeing. And we thought that this would be a good exercise for Cynefin. Start at secondary school, you're coming into a new area, and to explore photographs and to try and orientate those photographs and place them on the map, take a walk around, to perhaps have a compass in hand where they can orientate the direction that the camera has taken the photograph from. All lovely geographical things that can create those questions and those discussions, but most importantly, concrete those experiences of looking at a map and then looking and observing. And quite frankly, sometimes it's just getting our pupils to observe things that is quite often the most difficult things that we need to do. It's very difficult for a pupil sat inside a classroom to be thinking about what's going on outside. If they go outside, they come back in, they've got a wealth of things that they can talk about. So we're really developing oracy as well within our classroom when we have this kind of experience. Again, this is another article that I found which I really liked, and this is part of emotive mapping, and there is a lot of focus on this. There's a lot of sort of facilities out there and activities that you can use, and again, going around that school site to give an idea of what they feel there. It might be that they're on the field where year 11 do their football, and they're year 7s, and they might actually feel challenged there, so it gives them a different emotion. It could be a nice comfy space where they sit down with their friends for dinner time, and it gives them this ability to be able to vocalize a sort of emotions. And then because they might be doing it in separate groups going around the school site, they might get different reactions to, or we would hope they would get different reactions. And so we can discuss that when we can start looking at the environment. You can start looking at, sort of what makes it better, what could be improved in that. So there's a lot of space geography there that we can look at, and about place and how we feel about it. And I think there's also things that you can talk with the pupils about how to improve the experience they've had. What other questions might they need to know, or might they need to be understanding of? This is a very old piece of work that we've done, but it does work. It's one that we've introduced many years ago, and perhaps might be coming back to. But the idea is that, if there's a new picnic table, give the pupils a reason for collecting that data beyond perhaps just finding where the windiest place is and where the sort of most warmest places and so on, to actually get them to be thinking a little bit wider, thinking about what else might it be about this place. So, okay, the warmest place may be in the yard, in a little corner away from the wind. However, they may want an aspect and a view as well. So they might have other things that they want to be thinking about. And so, sort of a planning sheet, having there, asking those questions. What needs to be collected? What do we need to know? If we've got a picnic table, what do we need to know people want. It could be that they do a questionnaire. It could be that there's a lot of prep beforehand. Understanding how to collect information. You may need some equipment with this one. The previous ones were particularly presented because really fieldwork and fieldwork equipment is always something that we kind of worry about the cost of and whether the children will look after it and so on. So here there might be a little bit of equipment that we need to have, and them going around and being responsible for particular sites and perhaps arguing for that site and putting the evidence forward. So all of this, thinking like a geographer, speaking like a geographer, it gives a really rich experience there. So that's the good old favourite, microclimates. Where should we get this new picnic bench? The problem always is when the picnic bench doesn't arrive in the right place, the children are always a little bit disappointed. However, we'll have to cope with that. And obviously the collection of the information can be done within 20 minutes if it's properly prepped, because you don't have a great deal of sort of travelling time or a worry about it. So, the actual collection of that data can be within the lesson. And that might please other subject areas because you're not taking them for a day out of everywhere else, which is always, oh, it's another geography trip, is it? It's the cry in some staff rooms if we're ever allowed into staff rooms again. And then I was trying to think, right, well, obviously, being secondary based, thinking about what primary school could do, but in actual fact, these sense journeys could also be something a little bit like the emotive mapping that we do, but they could actually have a journey around school where they're looking at sense, sort of textures and feelings, and perhaps having reasons for this, whether that be in a primary school or whether that be in conjunction, especially with the new curriculum, working with other subject areas and looking at sort of materials and textures, or looking with your art as how you could actually express that. So there may be possibilities there that you could utilize what is good geography, but also feeding into our other subjects as well. And I just quite like the sort of mapping of a line, a linear line, and feeling those sort of textures, and as the pupils go through around perhaps just a small part of the site. This is another piece of field work that I've done a number of times around the school site. And it really is to sort of reiterate, you don't need lots of sort of equipment. For example, the drain pipe, or it could be a clear bottle. It's morphed into a clear bottle, so they tend to work a little bit better now. And you're just pouring a measured amount of water into it. You're perhaps timing for how long the depth of that water changes over a centimetre. They've got a quadrat that's made out of rulers, and they're at different points around the school site, and they've got to be questioning. And that's following on really again from Steph is getting your pupils to question what, where, why, when, how, looking under trees, looking close to paths where the ground is a little bit more trampled, looking at sort of longer grasses and next to buildings. And this definitely took a lesson to prepare, a lesson to go out, and then collating it together. So you're talking about 3, possibly 4 lessons, but the actual experience of going out there and collecting it, was certainly, just the lesson. So just a 40 minutes. And, again, echoing some of the conversation earlier, that if you are canny enough and you've got data that does work for them, because they may have made some mistakes about collecting their data, or somebody didn't put the stopwatch on, or those arguments, you can have that data that does fit, and the pupils can work with that, but they experience the collection of it, and I think that is really important. This year, one of the things our year 10s have had, year 7 was the last time that they were in full school, and with the experiences that we've had in terms of COVID and the restrictions, we were really quite worried that our year 10 cohorts would actually be faced with an NEA without having had any inquiry experience at all. And so we decided what we would do in our first term. We are lucky, colleagues, so we've got the luxury of 3 lessons. So we've got a single and a double in a week. So it is easier for us to do this. We allocated a single period of over 4 weeks for them to carry out a little inquiry. So again, this was using the school site, and they were looking at primary data. So they were going to go out and collect on site, but they were also looking at secondary data, and some of my colleagues in the geography department had gone out and collected this data prior to. So they had primary and secondary, and so we were trying to bring them the understanding of that. And they also had qualitative and quantitative data as well. So they had the environmental quality survey, which, you know, like a bipolar, where they were coming up with opinions. And they also had a quantitative, a little app on their mobile phones that measured the noise. And when they have their lesson, it's Key Stage 3 dinner time. So we know it was going to be noisy. We know perhaps there could be more litter, that it was just cluttered with the younger children, whereas my colleagues took their data at the end of the school day when the children weren't on site. So there was palpable difference there that they could look at. But it was just this process of setting questions, thinking about how to collect data, presenting it and analysing it. We didn't really go into conclusion and evaluation, but we did feel that this was something worth doing with our year 10s, and it was all on school site, and it was all within the geography lessons, and so therefore less grumbles from our colleagues. But I think the message is basically this, you know, seize the day, not quite carpe diem, and we didn't stand on chairs or anything, but this was me discussing with another colleague, and we were having the joy of teaching low pressure systems and weather through you know, cross section of a low pressure system. And there was just the most wonderful sky outside. So we rushed out, we took a photograph of it. And we knew that there was this front coming across. So we could talk about the sky. So we used this with the pupils, and because it was a photograph of the sky that they literally see outside the geography classroom, there was great authenticity to it. By the time they had their lesson, which was in the afternoon, then we had much more cloud, more sort of low-lying cloud. It was getting, the conditions were less beautiful, as you can see in that photograph. And so there was a palpable difference between that photograph and the experience they had. So we just came out of the classroom, we walked out of the block, onto the field, and we looked up at the sky, and we noted down the differences between this picture and what they were feeling. They did it very quickly because it was quite cold as well. But, you know, go out there, get the pupils to look at the sky, get the pupils to look at the view. I mean, we are particularly lucky in Fries that we've got mountains. So another exercise is to do sketch map drawing and then look on OS maps. But look around your school grounds, even though you may not be blessed with as wonderful a view as I am, you have got facilities on the school grounds that you can utilise. And I think it's that experience that we want to develop for our pupils. Okay, so I will stop sharing and I will pass over to Nicola. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Thank you so much, Steph, for your great presentations. I hope that everyone else has had some good ideas shown to them this afternoon. I was just wondering if anyone had any questions. Steph's still with us, and Fiona, and I can certainly answer the ones about the middle presentation, which Jill did. Unfortunately, Jill's had to leave us now. But if anyone has got some questions they would like to ask about it, I think something else which came up just before we go on to those is the fact that it's not just our current pupils who have not had many experiences, but remember that the children in primary schools coming up from year 7, this year, next year, and the following year potentially will have not had that many experiences either. And it's going to take a while for every child to get back into being able to do these things. And I think we as geographers are extremely well placed to actually give these experiences which Estin are going to be looking for. And it's not just geography they're going to be looking for them in, it's going to be other subjects, but geography just lends itself to very easy, simple and accessible experiences, which we can then celebrate. So there is a question from Steph to everybody. And Dawn as well. So Dawn, any inquiry ideas for primary school or lower primary? I would say have a look at the GA website. The primary people of the GA are extremely active in creating and also putting up inquiry ideas for primary school children. They are a very proactive group. And another thing perhaps to look at is the work by Margaret Roberts on fieldwork inquiry, which is exceptionally good as well. And it can be every single idea, I think, which has come up today could be taken to even upper or lower primary level. I don't know, Steph, if you feel the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you start simplistically, just like a good geography teacher would, and then you can obviously scaffold upwards and just make the questionnaires more challenging. You can make the questions you ask them as children in class more challenging, and just literally tease out the geography, which is what, if anyone remembers Duncan Hawley from PGC, he was my lecturer, and that's what he always said, tease out the geography. So start off simple, get the children to come up with the questions and scaffold upwards to make it a little bit more challenging each time you do it.
Yeah, and another one you can do if you want to get them using or talking like a geographer is a very simple one with a double ring of children back to back, and the child facing outwards of the ring has to describe to the child inside what they can see. And then you can get some good geographical terms coming in, and they're using their language as well and developing their language skills. And that can literally be done in the playground. And if you spread the children out, you'll get a huge diversity of different scenes. And I've done that with children, and it's very simple to do. Someone mentioned mood mapping and smell mapping. Steph, there's quite a few things coming up on the chat now. Any other questions from anybody?
Nicola, there's a good one we used to do, which was, if people remember, the old car tax disc, where you had to look at where people came from. I know it's more of a secondary one, but it depended on the, how safe it is to walk around your primary school car park, and obviously with the permission of the head, the children could even look at maybe, where cars have come from, where they were made. They could even look at mapping how far teachers have travelled from, anything like that. Just going around the classrooms asking their relevant teachers, well, how far have you travelled here today?
Or method of transport, that as well. Yeah. Or how long did it take you?
Yeah. And linking that to ethical then. Is it ethical to drive everywhere? Is it ethical to cycle everywhere?
Yeah. Great, thank you. I'd also say, I'd reiterate, do have a look at the GA website. It's got loads and loads of examples, and also the RGS website as well has got some very good examples. And I think some of them you have to be members for, unfortunately. And somebody asked a question earlier about Digimap. Is it still a subscription service? Unfortunately, in Wales, it is at the moment. But at the GA conference, Digimap will be there, and I'll be asking again whether or not they can provide it for schools in Wales, because I think schools in England can now actually get it for free. Is that right, Mike? Do you know?
Sorry, Nick. Hi, everyone. Nice to see everyone again. Yeah, I'm over the border now. I'm not sure. I think England's are still paying for it, but I will check on that. In fact, Naomi's on. Naomi will know. Naomi.
It's so the thing is, it's schools that get a requires improvement or it's schools with a low Ofsted rating get it for free.
Okay.
So if you wanted to make the point, if at the conference, you could perhaps talk about, could you get schools with a large number of preschool meal students, maybe if that would be a way to go with them to get them to open out to some Welsh schools at least that would, you know, really benefit from it.
It is a good service if you can afford it, because you can actually then import data as well from things like the police data and crime rates and things like that. And you could do that combined with looking at your local environment, and you could also do a crime study as well using police data, and then input it onto your Digimaps, which is great.
Yeah, I'm just about to type up, Nick, something. I think it's Sustrans. They actually have a mapping exercise. Yeah. I think they have a mapping exercise of trying to find the best bike route to school. So if you've got a large number of students that do cycling, it might be kind of something that they can investigate, or look for your safest journey kind of direction into school, because then you're making it very relevant to their safety. You tie into their personal development program even, so PSHE. So there's a bit of a cross-curricular link.
And that could be the same. You could use that as well for primary children.
Yeah, definitely.
How many roads do they have to cross in order to get to school? Just looking at maps and then perhaps even drawing their route to school.
Yeah, no, I think there's loads of ideas there, and one I've mentioned at the top, I don't know if people are keeping up with the chat, was kind of mapping your CCTV around the school. I used to do that myself in my last school, and that was really interesting. And it also gave you a great insight if you were kind of linked to a head of year or something to share with any issues that might kind of pop up. So there's a bit of kind of real life data there to support your school as well. So there's there's a few ideas. Kind of, it's great to hear tonight. So thank you.
That's brilliant. Any more questions from anybody? I would say the GA have just produced a paper which is based on it's Emma. Is Emma with us? I don't know if Emma is with us. Based on what geography teachers need, and one of the things that came up is fieldwork experience. And obviously as geographers, we think we need fieldwork experience, but also we're going to have non-specialists who we also need to, if you like, coax. I'm sure once they've experienced it once, they'll be with you going every time out doing your fieldwork with you. It's just hooking them onto it. I remember going out with a history teacher once who'd never done it and just kept saying, I just want to do this every time now. So, and you know, people would always then volunteer to go out with you to do field work. So it's just hooking them onto you. Okay, everybody. I hope everyone's found this evening useful. A long day, I think, for everybody. And I hope you find it useful, and there'll be another one soon. We'll let you know when. Thank you very much.